Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band podcast. I am your host, Benedict Hein. We're here live at the Studioszene on the studio sofa. And I'm here with my friend and co-host, Malcolm Owen Flood, of course. And we're joined by Warren Huart for the third time on this podcast. I'm super excited about it to do this. We're live, hopefully, and you can also watch this or listen to this afterwards on the podcast.
Marvelous.
So, welcome, Warren. Thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, it's a lot of fun.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we love coming to Hamburg.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful city. We flew in from the UK. We just got back from AES in New York. We flew in from UK. I think it's a 1 hour, 40-minute flight. And we were ahead of schedule. So it's like you kind of take off. You go, hey, we'll be landing. Oh, we're coming into,
Yeah.
Lovely.
It's beautiful.
We were just talking about how you live in a constant state of jet lag, right? Because of everything.
Yeah, it's interesting because in 2019, before that little thing, the pan, whatever, before that happened, we'd done, I can't remember, 13 international flights in 1 year in 2019. And I think it was like, we knew it was going to be the beginning of just like, this is going to be insane for the next few years. And then, COVID hit. And then suddenly we're not even leaving, the vicinity of our house. No. So it's quite an interesting change, to say the least. But it's nice to be back and doing it all over again. I mean, the world is a beautiful place.
It sure is.
As tired as I might feel, I do actually like people, and I love traveling and meeting people. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. So the topic for today is going to be how do you stay creative while mixing? So how do you keep things fresh? How do you avoid doing the same things over and over again? What do you do to mix things up? So that's going to be our theme. And I know that you just moved to a different studio, swapped out everything basically, right?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, not just, but it's been a while, but still.
Yep.
So I assume that has changed a lot for you probably, but it's not about the gear only. So I don't even know where to start with this, but tell us, how do you stay creative when you mix, and how do you avoid repeating yourself, basically?
Well, your question when you first asked the first part of it, it's interesting because getting organized and having a system also gives you freedom.
Very true. I agree with that.
So it's like if you do, and this is where everybody's going to argue, and that's fine. Please, argue down below about it. But I actually believe if you've come up with a system that you can get from A to B pretty quickly and get things sounding really, really good, you can then be really super creative. Now that system could be all kinds of things. For a lot of traditional mixers, their template would have been the SSL. For somebody like Crystal Algae, who has mixed stuff I've done, it is essentially his template. I think he said in an interview I did with him 7 years ago, one of our first interviews, he said, this is my big template. Right. And, people can take that as a negative, but that's a ton of acquired knowledge. So, knowing that this EQ, this compressor, and blah, blah, blah is going to give you a result that's going to get you 95% of the way there isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now, there's an argument for the opposite as well, and just as valid. The opposite as well of just pulling up faders and deciding what to do. And actually, at 4:30, we're going to go in and mix 2 or 3 songs, depending how much time we've got, in the stage next door. And I'm going to do just that. I'm going to do the absolutely, let's try not to use a plugin. If we do use a plugin, let's, why do we need it? Is it just high passing? Does it need a gentle bit of compression? Or should we rather be automating? So I'm going to sort of challenge people because I think, I'm sorry to be a bit of a tangent on your question.
It's perfect.
But I think with this sort of I'm sure you've all noticed, everybody here, you guys have noticed, it's gone nuts on plugins in the last 2 years, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's gone absolutely, it's gone insane. Now everybody that's ever done music has got a plugin. Or a series of plugins, and
we're going to head into Black Friday soon, which is going to be a whole other level of madness.
And there's companies now that are selling kits to build plugins to YouTubers, so they can build their own plugins and sell them and all this kind of stuff. Everybody's looking to market, and it's getting flooded with plugins. And the problem or the reality. Problem is a big strong word. The reality is because there's so many plugins, we all feel we have to be using them. Because somebody brought out this new dynamic multiband distortion, octave divider, chorusing, flanging, blah blah, limiting, saturating, clipping, so and so, with a reverb built in. and so you must get that. And I get it. We do test out a lot of these plugins and review them. But it is very overwhelming. And if you go and talk to a mastering engineer, for instance, they rarely, you think they would be the one that would use dynamic and multiband compression most of all. They'll say, yeah, I'll use it every now and then as corrective. But now we're using these tools to mix. And so everything is getting smaller. It's just getting smaller. I get sent stuff all the time, and everything has just gone from being this big in the rough to being this big in the final thing, because everything has been corrected and perfected and limited and compressed and bleedy-blah to within an inch of its life. And unfortunately, it's just taken all of the energy and everything out of it. So there's an argument for two different ways of approaching it. I think whichever way you approach it, you should be listening to the tracks.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Pull them up on fader, do a static mix. Just do a static mix, especially when you're coming up and you're trying to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because having a template is great when you've been doing it for blah, 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 blah amount of years and you've done thousands and thousands of mixes. You could probably, or you will be able to create a template which will get you through most situations. And, people sell their templates, and you can create a metal track in 20 minutes using their template, but you're going to sound like everybody else.
Yeah.
So to answer your question directly, I think there's two very distinct ways of working, and you have to decide what is best for you, but probably most importantly, what is best for the song, what is best for the artist. If it is a case of pulling something up which is very organic, very live, recorded, performance-based, you don't want to be feeding that into your smash and grab template that's going to make everything loud and punchy and crash, So the creativity is going to be sitting there doing volume automation, maybe messing with some panning, a bit of high passing. We've got a track today that we're going to use in there, which is very much like that. It's recorded live off the floor in one take. So when I come to mix that, it's going to be like, well, what should I be high passing? What should I be automating? What should I be letting the original musicians who performed together just not touch?
Right.
Because they were all listening to each other, like playing a little bit louder here, playing a bit quieter there, all of this kind of stuff, I should be leaving that as is.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. But then there's going to be the other thing where somebody has recorded, like I said, like a metal song, something that's really loud and everything's competing with everything else to be heard. You're going to probably get a little bit more surgical in that, depending on how good the production was.
Yes, that's
it all comes down to that.
Yeah.
And listening. Yeah.
Yeah, because if the production was good, the person who recorded the drums, the person who maybe laid in some drum samples or whatever, it's modern metal, it's going to probably be predominantly drum samples, unfortunately, but in reality, if they've constructed a really powerful, aggressive drum sound that is not like full of low mids and yucky and dirt, but if they've done it, you should be able to pull it up on fader and go, okay, I just need to do a bit of this, bit of that. There's room for my bass guitar. Bring your bass guitar in. You want some attack on it, but you don't want anything over about 3K. You start thinking this way to build a track, to build something. So it's very, very different ways of working dependent on the song. And I've always believed this strongly. It's why Produce Like a Pro genre-wise is so diverse. Why, 1 week we'll do something with Christian, like, mixing modern metal. And then the next week we're talking about Fela Kuti and Afrobeats. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we'll do Dwayne Allman the week after that. You know what I mean? It's just, to me, it's like we need to embrace and understand all of these different ways of working. Because if you want a career in this industry, you've got to be able to do that. There's very, very few people that are genre specific and super rich. Yeah. No matter how much we want to pretend that, for every Serban Gurnier who's predominantly in pop, there's 1,000 other people that are making a living that are literally moving between spoken word and death metal and pop and country and everything,
Yeah, I think both can work, honestly, because I transitioned, for example, from doing everything to almost only doing rock or like heavy music, and it works well for me, like in this case, but I know that it's not the reality for everyone, and it's still like everything under the rock umbrella, so it's still a little diverse. So yeah. But I think this is actually something I wanted to touch on, is like when people are specialized on a certain thing, or when they predominantly mix their own music, let's say.
Yeah.
How do you avoid doing the same things over and over again if the input is kind of similar always? Like, let's say you don't have like all these different genres, and it's like the same band or the same type of band, but you still want to
Sure.
make it unique to the song, to the artist, and then people often find themselves using the same template because that's what's worked in the past. And like, what can you do in those cases, or how do you even do the whole like listen to the song thing and serve the song? Like, what does that
Well,
even mean for people?
I would argue, depending on the situation, that actually a template's going to help you.
Yeah.
Because if you get something, let's just, when I get asked to mix a record, I particularly remember this French metal band I worked with. I did a couple of albums. I did co-production on one and mixed it, and the other one I just mixed. The first one I ever did, I just mixed, and then they brought me in as a co-producer and an engineer on the second. And when I came to mix both those records, particularly the first one, which I hadn't done, so it was a little scattered and wasn't, the drum sound needed a lot of work. So I spent a long time on the first song really getting the drums that they had recorded in a studio in Paris to sound good. And it took a lot of work. There was a lot of phase adjustment, there was mics that, room mics that weren't very roomy, and they were just kind of whatever. So I had to sort of create this big drum sound that sounded supernatural without relying too much on samples. So I did all of that. Now, that actually became the template for the rest of the songs, for the other 9 songs, for the 10 songs. But it did mean that I had a starting place that was good.
Yep.
So I could be creative. So if I wanted the drum sound on the third song, say I was mixing, to be a little smaller and tighter, particularly in the verses, I could solo out certain mics that I'd spent some time really getting to sound really powerful and energetic, and just use them and push them up. So I would argue that it's one in the same. If you've got the record and you spend a long time on the first song, which is typical when you're mixing an album, you spend a long time, 2 to 3 days sometimes, on one song, and then the second song might be a day, and then the third song is half a day, and before you know it, you're mixing 2 or 3 songs a day, and you're going back to the first song and applying new information you got from song number 10 to song number 1. That's all of our process of
Very true.
when we mix albums. But the point is, I would argue that you can get creative because the template that you've created for that album from the first song allows you the freedom to get something good sounding. Like, oh, okay, it's sounding good now. It's sounding really close to the rest of the record. Now, where do I want to take it? Do I want it to be more aggressive or less aggressive? Do I want to solo this mic? I think the difficulty comes with the creativity is when you're spending too much time on the technical.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing creative about making the same decisions over and over again, right? You've already done that. Why would you spend an hour redoing that phase alignment on the next song?
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
It's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time. So I think, but it's an interesting discussion because if you've never been through this process, somebody watching or listening to this will be like, oh, well, that's getting rid of the... It's not. Because it's really just doing what people used to do when they made records. We have a wonderful interview that we did 2 weeks ago at Abbey Road with Ken Scott, and it is I think one of the best interviews we've ever done. Its watch time is ridiculous. Like its average watch time is like 1 hour and 21 minutes.
Wow, that's
people
the
stay
movie.
and watch it. Yeah,
That's
but
awesome.
that's the average. There's people who accidentally click on it thinking they're watching something else and then click away. But the people that stay, most of them stay to watch the whole bleeding thing. And then we went and interviewed, it hasn't come out yet, Emre, who did the immersive mix with Ken of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. And we weren't unfortunately allowed to broadcast the original tracks without permission from the label. But we were blessed to sit in Emre's immersive room and listen to the solo tracks of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, the album. And when he came to mix it in immersive, he used one compressor on a song.
Wow, yeah.
And why did he do that? Because Ken committed EQ, compression, and everything on every single track. So if you bring up the kick drum, it just goes poof, poof. It doesn't go click, dump, boop, beep, beep. Oh my God, do I have to do this to make? It just sounds like the kick drum on the record. Yeah. When you bring the vocal up, there are vocals he played that had nothing done to them. Nothing. Just done. So when you hear Ziggy Stardust, and the best thing about it was it sounded 100% utterly and thoroughly modern. It is the vinyl mastering process and everything that we all know and love. Everybody's like, oh, I love vinyl. And don't get me wrong, we love vinyl. But they did so much to it to reduce the bandwidth, whopping off the low end. So the kick drum actually is boof. But when you buy it on the vinyl, like I grew up as a kid, it's like do, 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 do. Because everything below 80 hertz was just wiped off.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, solo the kick drum on the multi-tracks, it's there.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the same thing Jack Douglas always used to say to me. Him and Shelley Yakus and Jay Messina, all those great New York engineers and producers, they said they'd always be disappointed when they heard their song on the radio, because they'd spent all this time and they'd gone to 60 hertz on a Pultec and boosted the schnizzle out of it and got this big fat kick, and then on the radio it said deep deep gat deep deep gat. They just completely wipe all that stuff off to put it onto vinyl. You know, we love vinyl, don't get me wrong. I love the experience of picking up a CD, picking up a 7-inch or a 12-inch or even a 10-inch, you know, remember those, you know, to see the artwork, to read the liner notes. I love all of that stuff, we all do. But to pretend that it was the pinnacle of hi-fi listening is comical, you know. Because the engineers and producers and mixers were disappointed because their music had been bandwidth reduced to fit onto that format. And so anyway, there I am, sitting in a room with Emre, who mixed it, and hearing soloed tracks of Bowie and the band, all these phenomenal players, Mick Ronson's guitar stuff, and there is one compressor on all of the tracks, and that is how the album was mixed. When they mixed it, they brought up the faders and panned it around, and maybe they went, oh, this to be a little brighter, maybe do a little extra bit of high passing. And then, you know, they'd be sitting there going, okay, we're going to print the song now. You got to ride the vocal in this section like a dB because it's a little low. That was how they mixed it.
Yeah.
That's how Dark Side of the Moon was mixed. Dark Side of the Moon. You pull up the faders, that's how it sounds. It sounds like that record. So my long diatribe is just to remind you, when you're dealing with a template, all you're really doing is trying to get it to that place.
Yes, yeah.
That's all you're doing, because people are sending you tracks. I don't know about everybody here, but when I get sent tracks, I often get DIs.
Oh yeah,
with no amp on them.
Yeah.
Maybe a note saying what it could possibly be. You know what I mean? Maybe a rough or something, or when or they put a, bless you, or they have a virtual amp on there, which I don't have. You know, because we're joking about every YouTuber now has a virtual amp. You know what I mean? It's like. Coming soon. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, this is the world we're living in.
Absolutely.
You know, there's so much diversity, which is cool. And don't get me wrong, all these jokes about it. It's great if you find the 100 plugin, the one plugin that you like that helps you out. Great, but relying on them and not committing is why we're in this sort of mess that we're in, where everybody's complaining all the time and we're worried about this stuff. You know,
and it's all about like having. At the end of the day, like about having a vision, like knowing what you actually want and putting a producer hat on and like doing that from the beginning and not hoping that someone else sometime will make a decision. Like it's funny how we're going to have a talk over there at the Gear Stage on mixing workflow, and part of that talk, a lot of it actually, is going to be about the source tracks, because you want to be your future self's best friend and track as if it's like track whatever it's supposed to be, and it's exactly what you just said, which I love. So yeah, sometimes we get sessions, like Thomas and I work in the studio together. We get sessions sometimes where it's what you said, a DI, and then sometimes even MIDI drums, and then it's like, do some drums, do the guitars, and like I could do anything with that. Like you could go in all kinds of directions.
You're basically producing the track.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to that, I think. And so, but
then I put that question up a few months ago, where I said, should you be sending your tracks to people? Should you be sending your session? And it was like warfare. Like people were like, I can't believe it, that's my IP, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, if you're producing a song and you've been paid to do it, and you use 57 plugins on the vocal to get that vocal sound, and you then turn them off because, you know, it's your IP and I don't want people stealing my ideas, print it then. Print it with those effects on. If you're worried about it, print it with that effects on. And this idea that... you know, here's a good way to surmise it. When I interviewed Joe Chiarelli a few years ago, he started young. He was doing Frank Zappa records when he was a teenager. One of the greatest engineers ever lived, and a sweetheart. Joe Chiarelli said that, you know, when you worked on an album, you knew you weren't, with a couple of exceptions, you knew you probably weren't going to be the only engineer on the record. You know, especially in the 80s, it might get passed from 2 or 3 different situations. Overdubs were done by this guy, somebody did this. But you had a level of pride. You wanted your drums, your bass, and your rhythm guitars that you had printed to come up on fader, be panned around, and sound like $1 million. Yeah. You weren't like, trying to send something confusing. You wanted people to go, hey, who did those drums? They're amazing.
Totally.
Oh, it's Joe Chiarelli. He's in LA. He's amazing. He's only 20 years old. Wow, we should hire him. As opposed to like, who did those drums? I can't make them sound good. But now it's this sort of combative idea that we're all, and it goes back to what I say all the time. It's all about great collaboration. You want to work with people that, elevate themselves, want to create great music, and want to help each other out. But yeah, I was really surprised when I put that. Not surprised. What am I talking about? I wasn't surprised, but it was interesting how people didn't really see it in those terms.
I'm surprised. That is surprising to me.
You won't. When you're sending your files to Michael Brower or Crystal Algae or Serban or Manny or all people I've sent songs to mix, if you pulled off every single plugin, zeroed everything out, took off all the bussing, took off all the effects that you put it and sent it to them, they would send you a note back saying, please send me the session.
Yeah,
every
give
single
me the song.
professional. They'd be like, that is the sound of the song. That's what the artist is used
100%.
to. If you want to print it, go print it. But saying that you have to restart again means that you just unproduced your song.
Totally. It doesn't sound like a song anymore. And I think that every step in a recording should inspire the creativity of the next person in line, right?
And the decision making.
Yeah. Exactly. It needs to inform the next step. And how you meant to mix a song that has not been informed because you just removed it all.
I think a good example of, maybe it's not that modern, but modern-ish 90s, is listen to any Radiohead record. Listen to the classic, Benz or OK Computer. If you listen to those records, everybody, if I was to do a random poll here and pick somebody and say, how many guitar tracks do you think are on, name a Radiohead song? They're probably all going to say like 4, 5, 6 or 7. I think it's quite complex. And then we'll put the song on and realize there's actually only ever 2 guitar parts playing at any time. But what there is a guitar sound which is absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Which is like maybe 1 or 2 amps, maybe blended together with some rooms and a bit of chorusing and maybe something that makes it sound super interesting that works with the part, because they wrote this part and they've got this weird trem maybe going on with this little hint of distortion and a bit of echo that's kind of spread over here. It's all committed ideas. Rather than going, well, here's my little fiddly little part. No, it's not quite right, so I'll add another guitar part. It's getting better. And then if I put another, it's in the production and it's baked in. It's baked into it. And yet we're all sitting here, not us necessarily, but people are arguing about modern production and why are the songs not good enough and blah, 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 blah. And there's too much track count. Well, again, oh my God, there's so many tangents here. Where do we go?
But that's good though, because I think one thing also that's important to mention is if someone who is in a genre that requires more in the mix and not just like a high pass here and there, which there are genres where you have to do more because it's not supposed to sound like the band in the jam space.
Sure.
And then those people should know that I think that it's okay to do more if the song calls for it. Like both are totally fine. Like that's the other thing.
So it's okay to mute.
Because
if you don't like something, just mute it and try it again.
Because I see the other end of the spectrum as well, where someone tries to do, let's say, modern metal or like some super polished, larger-than-life thing, and then they hear this totally correct and valid advice like you just gave, and then they think, oh, I'm just allowed to use one compressor and like do a little high passing, and then they're afraid to boost 10 dBs, although it would be the right call. Like all of that is completely correct.
Yeah, but here's a human predicament, isn't it? We live in an age where we just want a tool to fix something. And I'm sitting here listening to these 3 idiots sing, well, 1 idiot and you 2 guys, sitting here talking, trying to find out what's the magic plugin that you use that's going to make my music sound great. Yeah. And the reality is like, there is no magic anything or whatever. But I think we're all looking for technical advice to solve a creative issue.
That's so good.
And this is why, people ask me about DAWs. Yeah, I use Pro Tools. It was like the best and only real DAW when I started in the mid-90s. So there you go. So I'm on Pro Tools. But there are people that use, especially obviously in Deutschland, there'll be a lot of Cubase users. Of course, Steinberg here is dominant. Wherever you are. The point is like everybody uses whatever DAW. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is that you know it back to front so that you're not being hindered by it. Like it's painful watching people like get the mouse and go. It's like if you don't know the key command, learn it. It's no longer it's a necessary part of our process. So learn the technical side, etc., to free yourself to be creative. But don't rely on the technical side to solve a problem.
Yeah, totally. Before we wrap this up here, Malcolm, I wanted to...
I thought we just got started.
Yeah, me
too.
too, but I just looked at my watch here. Like, Malcolm, you wanted to say something about the...
He wanted to talk. He's like, Warren will not stop talking.
No, I'm comfortable. I got coffee. I'm enjoying the show.
Where'd you get a coffee? I want coffee.
It's around the corner. I'll show you after.
You mentioned the whole Creative Nook thing before when we were preparing for this. Like,
Right.
I wanted you to ask this question because I love it so much. So
Please
let's do that.
You do strike me as a very creative person because
Who's he talking about?
He's
He's looking this way. Did anybody see him? Quickly, stop that creative person that ran up here.
We need him in this conversation. Like,
your output is like phenomenal on a matter of social media, but also just catalog of work over the years as well, right? So I mean that's the sign of a creative person. But I'm always interested in how people get into that headspace. I guess writers tend to always have like their little writing nook. They go to the same place, they light the same candle, they have their same cup of coffee, and that gets them into like, all right, I'm in create mode kind of thing. And I'm wondering if you have anything similar, like almost a creative ritual that gets you in the Warren Huart produce like a pro mode.
That's an interesting thing.
Is it planes? Is it being on a plane?
I love that. That's a whole other. We can talk about planes all day. I mean, half of our companies and stuff that we have are named after planes.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But I love all that stuff. I mean, I love, I grew up like a lot of typical kids, liking kind of the technical stuff, liking cars and planes and boats and whatever, liking the kind of bits and bobs of it. So there is a part of what we do that, I'm joking about the creativity, but there is the technical element that I love.
Yep.
I do actually like editing drums and making it sound like I haven't edited them.
Right.
That's really important to me. Like, I'll do a drum edit. Like, I remember when I was working on the Aerosmith record, if I ever moved any Jerry Kramer drums, I would do the edit, move a couple of hits around, and then I would go through out of group, not moving in group, but out of group, drag all the transients over so they hit at every single transient. So the fade was at the beginning of the rather than leaving it, because obviously as it goes down in a straight line, you've got kick and snares and everything all like this.
Off, yeah.
And so I would go down and individually move everyone. I mean, if I'm going to do something, I'm obsessively going to do it. So if I'm just moving a kick, a snare, and a tom fill very slightly, I will go in there. So I do actually love the technical part. I love vocal comping. I know it's like, I love spending a long time listening, but then I also like when I am doing vocals, taking really amazing notes, so that when I come to comp, I know what I'm looking for. I style the thing I like. I go back to it the next day or later on the same day, whenever we're doing comping the vocals, and I go, oh, I know why I like that, or I was wrong, that doesn't work anymore, or whatever. And then it gives me a point to work from. So there is a bit of that kind of technical thing that plays into the creativity that I think is, something that we should all embrace. And it's making it all one. So people, here's a way of flipping your question around, because people always ask me or make sometimes negative comments about a genre or a song. So maybe I've just demonstrated how to use a compressor on maybe a very, very slick pop song. And somebody's like, I just can't believe that you would be able to work on this kind of music. How could you do it? And it's, whatever I work on, whether it is death metal, pop, punk, jazz, classical, whatever, I fall in love with it and I make it my own, and I just put everything into it. And that really sort of, to just answer your question, I just look for the positive in it. It's like when I'm teaching, I've said this a lot, but I'll say it again. If you're cutting a vocal, you're the singer, and you put your first take down, and the second, it's basically garbage. You didn't do a very good job.
It would be.
No, but let's just say it's your first take, you're nervous, you're in the studio. But on the second line of the second verse, you did this thing where you kind of go, and you breathe through the end of the note,
right,
and it sounds awesome. I don't go, oh my God, dude. Mr. Owen Flood, great name.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Owen Flood, that was the worst vocal I've ever heard in my life. I don't say that. What I say is like, hey, we should listen to this. and then I play you this little piece, and I go, see the way you breathe through the end of that? That, I want more of that. That was amazing. So immediately, I don't put you down. You don't feel crap. You've just been praised for something, and you bring more of that into it. It's an attitude. If you want to talk about how to be creative, bring that attitude in everything that you do. If you're working on something and you're struggling, find something you love about it. Yeah. What is it? Why did you even want to work on that song in the first place? You know, what was it? Totally. I think another thing for me is like when I start a process, especially in production, I have a template, a musical vision in mind. So if you bring in a song and it's an acoustic vocal, but to me there's a Motown groove in there somewhere. Maybe you're just playing it, but I hear I will start modeling and moving it towards that, even if it morphs into something else.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. I have a raison d'etre. I will have a reason to do this. I want to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing to do. You don't just sit there and go. I've heard people say that. A couple of people I respect have said, I wait for the inspiration to arrive. They're probably making $5 million a year for not doing very much because I don't know anybody in the modern world that really is like that.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when you're working at the highest level in any creative industry, not just music, you have to get the job done. Yeah. So how do you do that? For me, it's like finding that place. People send me music. Maybe the song's not very good, but there's vocal moments in it, or the song is really good, but the vocal's not right. The point is like I find what I love about it, and it's very rare to get something that you can't find something into it to connect with, even if it's just the smallest of element. And that's what I'm doing. And Mark is looking at us like, get off. Get off this.
I want to summarize that. Like, that did inspire me in a way where it kind of made me realize that I think creativity is always a positive thing. It's always, what do I like about this? It's never like, this is not working. That will never yield a creative answer. It's like, that what you're doing with that is with the direction we need to head. We need to follow that.
It's all interpretation.
Exactly.
If you bring the song in and you are, it is a reggae song in your mind, but it's not. It's a country song, or it's a country song, but it should be a reggae song. There is a way to talk about that and get that out without it being World War III and this is really depressing. I can't believe we're having a big. You can literally go, I love this song. I love your song. I'm not feeling it the way you're feeling it, but I love this song. Why don't we try this thing? Because it's really great. This speaks to me. And if it really was, I wanted you to be a reggae song. Maybe. Especially if you're an up-and-coming artist and you want to be inspired, or the other way, whatever it is, maybe I play you something. Maybe I go, listen to, Could You Be Loved by Bob Marley, hear that groove. We should try that. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. There's a way to find something. So what it really needs to be is you need to be a fan of music. You need to know your music. You need to... You know what I mean? Yeah. Going right back to the beginning, you need to have your feet, dip your toes into lots of different genres. Yeah.
Totally.
And I get it. When you're young and up and coming, you might just be the death metal guy. You might just be the pop guy. But go back, find out why the person that you love makes music, and you'll probably find that they grew up listening to something that you've never even heard of before. Go back to the roots. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Benedict's trying to get us off.
No, that's totally fine. I would love to continue this conversation. I just know that we're past the half-hour mark already, and I'm very sorry to have to cut it off. But that was really inspiring and amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you guys.
Thank you for sharing all that, Warren. And if you're watching this stream or the replay of that, listening to the podcast, go to...
Is it live streaming?
It is. So go to producelikeapro.com, of course. Go to the selfrecordingband.com and check out all the other stuff we have to offer. And for the people here, I know that they're doing a giveaway. So I think they're giving away a pair of Fame studio monitors. And all you need to do is take a picture and tag sound and recording and use the hashtag Studioszene, and then I think you can win this pair of speakers. And I think they're doing it every day, right? You can do it every day.
Every day.
So
you don't do hashtag give me those speakers.
Yeah. You do hashtag Studioszene, you tag sound and recording. And while you're at it, if you're taking a picture of us, feel free to tag us as well so we can repost and share your accounts as well. And thank you all for coming here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you, Warren, for sharing all these insights with us.
Thank you, everybody.
A pleasure.
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you. Guys, you rock.
Thank you so much.